Hello, and welcome back to Have a Nice Life, a career change survival podcast with me, career coach Pippi Kessler.
And me, Hadassah Damien, financial coach. This is another episode all about criteria setting. Again, figuring out what is a good outcome for you. Before we dig into the specifics of what your new jobs might be, why? How will you know that it's right? And if you didn't listen to the last episode, that was all about anti-ableist self-acceptance criteria and setting out values. You might want to go back and listen to that.
Just a reminder, you are in control and you have options. So if you're somebody who prefers to have a visual, you can go on either of our websites and download the workbook version of Have a Nice Life and do it in the workbook. Or you can just do the exercises from the podcast, whatever is best for you. So here we go. Here's 3 more exercises that are focused on figuring out what your personal criteria is for what a good life is and a good career for you.
So one of the criteria that is really based in reality is time. Time is one of our most limited resources. Some might even say more limited than money. So in this exercise, I'm going to suggest that you make a time accounting for yourself. There's 2 prompts that go into this exercise. The first is, how might I designate time for the things that make my life good, functional, and livable? And what might need to change in order for me to make this accounting work? So first off, you're going to list out the types of things that you need to do in a week or in a month, whatever shape of a thing you think helps you cover all the stuff that goes on. So this could be everything from cooking, self-care, caring for others, working, resting, commuting, playing, going on dates, having adventures, having sex, whatever things are important to you to make sure that they have time in your life, list them out. For me, when I made my list, it was helpful to categorize some of the work stuff a little more specifically. There was client work and there was internal work. Dog walking made it onto my list. Great. I put things into little categories just so I didn't have so many things going on. And once you have your list and your categories, assign an estimate of how much time you can and want to give this stuff in a regular week. And obviously some weeks are different. There's vacations, there's emergencies, but make it realistic and just a little bit aspirational. The restriction, of course, is that there are 168 hours in the week and you have to sleep. You can't make a time accounting that doesn't put rest in. And everybody needs a different amount of rest, and you're the expert on what realistically that actually takes. And if you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I sleep 7 hours a night, okay, great. But you also have to put on your PJs and brush your teeth and at some point wake up in the morning. That's at least 8 hours. Okay. So be realistic with the time. If you're looking in the workbook, you're going to see I have a little table. I have a little circle chart. If you're an Excel whiz, go ahead and make one for yourself. But you can also just write this out. What are the categories? How much time am I putting into them? I find a visualization really helpful because as I've done this practice for myself over the years, I've seen my rest category area grow, which is good, and I'm happy to see it. And so once you have this kind of self-functional set of things you do with hours adding up to no more than 168 hours in a week, or however many are in a month if you're doing a month-size thing, I want you to reflect on what your time accounting tells you. How we use our resources, like time and money, tell us a ton about our priorities, right? So you could look at this time accounting and say, okay, this is my aspirational, how it should be. What would it look like if I actually spelled out how I'm using my time today? How different would this be? And therefore, what kind of changes might I need to make to my life or to how I work to make this reality? You could also look at your time accounting and think, God, I'm proud of the fact that I've prioritized friend time and creative time and adventures with my kids time, or whatever those things are for you. Your time accounting is just meant to be in a reality check because our life is not just work, but of course you're going to want to make sure it includes time for work. So with that little tiny bite-sized activity, I'm going to hand it to Pippi to give you another one.
I love that exercise, the time accounting work exercise. And it's just peak Hadassah. The idea of having a spreadsheet and chart that helps you figure out how to make sure you have fun. I was like, the first time I
Don't
saw,
forget.
yeah,
Don't forget.
the first time I saw this exercise you made, I was just like, oh yeah, that's amazing. She's amazing. What a boss. What I'm going to talk about now is an exercise that I call the I don't have a vision board. And I'll explain more about what this is. One asterisk I just want to say right up top is that sometimes when people use the word like vision or stuff like that, they're not even really saying it, but you just start to immediately feel like they're blaming you if you don't have a vision for your life. Or sometimes it almost seems like it's implying that there's this part of figuring out what we want that's just all mindset, like just have positive vibes, baby. And that's just not real. Like struggles that we have in our life can't be reduced to mindset. Of course, our mindset is one part of it. Like our way that we think about our life is a part of our life. But our lives are subject to forces that are often like totally outside of our control. So if you are ever talking to someone and you're like, oh, you're blaming all my struggles on my mindset, that's unfair and they're being messed up. And it's also messed up to say that it should just be easy for everyone to have a vision and execute it. And we've talked a lot about this so far, that there's a lot of reasons why this could happen. Oppression, what happened in your childhood, uncertainty in the world. There can be a lot of different things that make it hard to figure out what you want or how to describe it. So also when Hadassah was going through that other visioning exercise, she's certainly not implying, and you are fucked up if you can't answer these prompts. She's just saying it could be that when you ask these prompts, it helps more about what you want. But I want to talk about a tool for when you really don't know when you ask those questions. So when I'm working with career coaching clients where what they're saying to me is, hey, I think that my biggest barrier is that I really can't feel the answer to that question. What do you want? What's your vision? Sometimes I do this exercise with them that I call the I don't have a vision board. And I want to teach it to you so that you can also try it if you are getting stuck. This is an art activity. Why it's an art activity is that it gives us a way to get some help from our subconscious. The basic summary of what the exercise is that you're going to make a collage that makes no sense about your dream life. And then you're going to try to use it to get some clues about what you want. Okay, do not be scared off, though, that I said the phrase vision board in the title of the exercise. Look, if I was reading a workbook or listening to a podcast and I heard someone say the word vision board, I would also might get spooked. Because as I said, there can be a lot of baggage about this. And there's this kind of genre of new age ladies who use vision boards. And when they use vision boards, they're implying that you are bad if you are having a hard time figuring out what you want. There's not going to be any time in this exercise where you're going to get blamed for not having a vision or really blamed for anything at all. We're going to just try to see what's true for you. Here is why it can be helpful to do this exercise. Sometimes when we ask ourselves, so what do you really want in your life? And we don't hear an answer, it's because we threw a heavy blanket on top of the answer that is preventing us from hearing what we think. Sometimes it's because we're trying to avoid getting disappointed. And other times it's because we're trying to protect ourselves subconsciously from seeing what we really want and then feeling that kind of gap between what is happening right now and what we wish was happening. So we're protecting ourselves emotionally from being like, ugh, my life is so far from what I really want. So if you walk up to the front of your house and knock on the door and are like, hey, what do you want? And you get no answer, we got to try another approach. You got to walk around to the back door and knock on the back door. We have to come up with a way to sneak through the window. And that's part of what art is really well suited to. It goes outside of the lines of how words and thoughts often pass through our conscious brain so it can help us give ourselves new information. The other reason that this exercise often really works is because it induces something called the priming effect. So if you are a nerd, you can also stay tuned after the exercise. I'm going to just explain a little bit about what that is. Hi, nerds. I love you so much. I'm so glad we're friends. Here's how you do the exercise. In short, get art supplies. 2, you make an art piece of any variety that has the title, My Dream Life. 3, do not worry if your dream life does not seem doable or realistic or makes no sense. 4, if your brain tries to prevent you from doing the exercise, try to prevent your brain from stopping you from doing the exercise. And 5, focus on the what, not the how. Okay, so here's a little more detail about this. When I say get art supplies, get whatever you want, like collage stuff, markers, pens, glitter, whatever. You can also use like an online drawing tool, like you can use an online whiteboard like Mural or Miro. The heart of this is you're going to make this like collage or this image called My Dream Life. What you're trying to do is you're trying to show in imagery, what would your life be like if it was like the ultimate, most favorite, awesome, amazing life that if you could wave a magic wand and it would be true, you would be like so pumped that was true. But here's the most important part about doing the exercise. It does not need to make any sense at all. So you can make a collage and it's you and you're in outer space and you live with talking teddy bears and you're in a house that's a gummy house and you also are eating gummy bears and you're eating your own house and you can eat your arm and that's fine. Or it could be that you draw, your drawing is like you are camping with Aretha Franklin and you're both making these beautiful fairy houses, but they're made of cheese. It doesn't matter. Just go for it. So use any medium you want, use any imagery that you want. Don't worry if it makes sense or not. If your brain is like, don't do this exercise, you might have to try to coach your brain a little bit to get through it. So your brain might be like, don't do this exercise, you're bad at art. Look, my grandma was an art teacher. She wrote this book that's a wonderful book called Art, Another Language for Learning. She was somebody who believes like all people are artists, like art belongs to everyone. And so she would say that couldn't be true because no one is bad at art. I love her very much, but I think actually that I'm pretty bad at art. Like, I know this because my sister is really good at art. So if we're both sitting together and we're like, draw a cat, she's going to draw something that looks like a cat. I'm going to draw something that looks like pasta. So what I'm saying is artistic training is totally unrelated to doing the exercise because it's not about making something that looks like a cat. It's about trying to activate your subconscious. So if it helps you, you can picture my grandma being like, you are an artist. All people are artists. Or if it helps you, you can picture me saying, look, your artist is bad, but I don't care. Just do it to activate your subconscious. Like you can see if either one of us helps you get through the exercise. Your brain also might be trying to stop you by saying something like, what is even the point of this? This isn't even going to happen. So like, why should I do this? And if that's happening, you might have to try to comfort yourself a little bit. So you might have to say, listen, brain, don't worry. I'm not going to like have us do something unsafe or unreasonable, like move to LA. I'm going to make safe choices and I'm going to like really try to think about things before we try anything. You could also say something like, look, brain, Pippi said this exercise is going to help. Can we just try it and see if it helps before we give up? So you could try something like that. So you're just trying to say to yourself, brain, look, we're just going to try to put everything in the collage, but I'm going to figure this out in more detail later. Don't try to stop me from doing this exercise. It's an exercise, okay? Here's what you do after you finish your collage. Look it over. Look at the different elements that you put on it and ask yourself this question. What clues does this element that I put in the collage hold about my criteria for a good life? For example, let's say on your collage, you drew this picture and you live with all your friends in this beautiful moss house that's lit by candles And during the day, you write poetry all day, and then at night, you have a dance party with all of your friends. If that's what you drew, there's actually a lot of clues in that. So if I was coaching you, I would say, this is some of the criteria I would guess, given what I'm looking at. One criterion might be community, that you want to have people you're close to close by and around you, and to be connected to them. A second criteria might be peacefulness, like the quality of the image has this very beautiful, peaceful quality. Another criteria from this might be comfort, like you drew yourself nestled in soft moss. It might mean that actually you want to be physically comfortable and feel cozy and safe. Beauty might also be a criteria that's coming out of this. You drew a very beautiful image, so it might be that you want to enjoy the aesthetics of where you are. That actually might be a big part of what helps you feel happy. Getting to write looks like this is another criteria, because in your dream, you write all day. So it means that having a lot of space for writing might be part of it. And fun might be another part of this that's really important, because you have a dance party every night in this picture. You want to have fun, and actually that's a big part of what you might need. So what you would do next is you would take each of those criterion and you would write them either in a list or on sticky notes. So what that list is that I just said is community, comfort, beauty, peacefulness, writing, fun. And then save it somewhere, because you're going to use it later when you get to brainstorming. If when you're doing that part, so you're looking at your collage and you're trying to distill from it, what criteria is this teaching me about what I need and prefer? This is a time to remember the principle of what, not how. So your job during this phase is to know what you want, but you really don't need to know how you're going to do it. In my own life, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted when I was in my 20s, my what made no goddamn sense. So if I was doing this exercise, what I would talk about at the time was I would say, I want to be a brain in a jar. I want to be like a brain in a jar in the woods, and I'm surrounded by like cotton balls, and I can help people with my brain. Like people could ask me about things, but I'm just in a jar and I don't have a body and they can't really see me. But this made no sense to me, because I was like, how would I ever do that? That's not real. But think about what's going on right now in my life. So one, you are listening to my disembodied voice try to help you through time and space without a body. That is actually exactly what I wanted. But I've never made a podcast before. So that's actually one example of how I am doing the thing that I wanted, even though I didn't know about podcasts yet because I had never heard of them. The other thing is that I coach people on Zoom all day from a house in the woods. So I'm basically a brain in a jar. I'm just like in a box, and I can help people. I can talk to people with my brain, but I'm not in the room with them, and I'm physically safe, and they can't see my legs, and they can't find me. And I couldn't even fathom that solution at the time that I initially had my wish. So a lot of times when we look back through time, it seems obvious, but we can't look forward usually to know how we're going to resolve it. So it's okay if it takes you a really long time. Like for me, the time gap between being like, I want to be a brain in a jar, to being a brain in a jar as my job was about 15 years. And that's totally fine. So it's okay if it takes you a while, but just for now, your main job is focusing on what, not how. Okay, one last thing for my true nerds. Here is another reason why this exercise helps our brain. It is because of something called the priming effect, which is that sometimes what we have just focused on changes what our brain is able to see or notice or conclude immediately after. So an example is if you get a hole in your sneakers and you're like, oh crap, I need to get new sneakers. you are going to start noticing people's sneakers a lot more than you did the day before. And it's not because more people are wearing sneakers. It's because you primed your brain to notice sneakers. So what that means is that if you make a collage about your dream life, even one that doesn't make any sense, you are priming your brain to notice patterns and connections linked to that idea. And you don't even have to do anything or try to notice. You're just going to be better able to notice pathways to that outcome because that's just the way that brains work. And this is also why when I was like shitting on New Age manifesting ladies, but part of why sometimes people are like, oh, that worked is because when you do manifesting techniques, like when you light a candle and think about your desire, it is inducing the priming effect. And it does make it easier to notice those things in the world and in your life.
Goodness gracious. It is so wonderful that we have really practical, structured ideas. We have neuroscience, we have art projects. And now for the third exercise, I'm going to take you through money, honey. So we are going to think a little bit about some ways you can identify the money that you need and want. For this podcast, I'm going to share a mini version of this. In our workbook, there's tables and other things that you could look at that would just be really boring for me to describe on a podcast. So I'm going to skip those parts. But first off, when we're thinking about our life and our careers, identifying the money that we want is almost so fundamental as to not require any introduction. But let's talk about it. Because at the end of the day, what I want for you is I want you to avoid accidentally doing all this work and then pulling up a job that actually doesn't meet some of your or all of your financial needs. And I will say it's totally okay to, on purpose, temporarily get a job that doesn't meet your needs on the way to resolving that. Sometimes that can look like working part-time through school or whatever. But what I don't want you to do is to come up with an idea like, oh my God, all of my criteria are fit by being an experimental performing artist. And then you're going to go down the road of trying to understand and experiment with that, only to realize that performance art is going to pay you like $250 once, which I will tell you from personal experience. So thinking about the money you want and need, it's one of your criteria, friends. That's life. And everyone needs and wants a different amount of money. But for starts, you probably need more money than you did even a few years ago. From 2019 to 2023, inflation was 20% on average. So some things cost more than that, some things cost less, but goods, services, cars, housing, food, education, you probably need more money than you did 5 years ago. But how much, you might say? High level, here is how to start to define the financial goals piece of this work transition puzzle. This is really important. It's really useful information you can get for yourself. I am not going to say it's easy. Digging into money, it's probably going to be opening doors that maybe you closed a while ago, right? In terms of what's possible for yourself or what you're allowed to get or want or have. But I really am still going to invite you to try to do your best to make estimates as informed as possible, thinking about the money that you need and want in the next few years. And if you're already feeling like the walls go up and the doors are shutting and you're not going to do it, there's 3 things I want to give you. So I can humbly suggest that you can try this work. And one is that it's okay to estimate, to guess, to round, to be a little uncertain. I know we've got this whole like perfectionism thing, but that's just patriarchy and white supremacy telling you have to get it perfect. You don't. It is okay to estimate. Number 2, I want you to suspend judgment about if you do or don't have this amount of money today. We're looking into the future. You might have this money. You might not. It really sucks not to have the money you need. I know. But one step towards getting that money that you need is to understand more precisely what the gap might be between here and there and what your ideal, sustainable, livable amount of money is. And then step 3, you might have to challenge some inherited or ancestral ideas about what's enough and what's okay. If you're used to making do with as little as possible, you might need to challenge yourself to push back on that. And On the flip side, if you're used to spending just voluminously without thinking about it, you might need to reel in some of your expectations so that you can examine them a little bit more. So in the exercise, the goal is to output a specific number or a range of numbers, right? $72,000, $60,000 to $80,000, to get a rough idea of what your income needs might be. Again, so you can move forward a little more intentionally, and so you don't end up getting underneath what you need. So you're going to estimate your costs in a couple categories. So first and foremost, the basics. I think of these as things you have to pay for or else there's a problem. So that's like your rent or mortgage, your utilities, your phone, debt payments, health, wellness, self-care costs, clothes, basic food, transportation, the bills. Those tend to be the things that we're most familiar with and understand the cost of. But please don't stop there, because a sustainable and healthy for your life amount of income is also going to include additional money to pay for semi-annual expenses. So that's like car insurance, travel, holiday gifts, pet stuff, surprises, medical expenses, car or home maintenance, longer term goals like having kids, taking a sabbatical, buying a house, money for your after working years needs. So that's your retirement savings, and a little fun for the love of. Go out, get an outfit, get your hair done, get your nails done, contribute, mutual aid, right? Go out to eat. So we've got the basics, semi-annual expenses, surprises, longer term goals, after working years, and have a little fun around here. These are 6 categories of spending. And depending on your family history, depending on your personal needs, those are going to look really different for different people. I want you to take some time to think about which of these are true for you. And I want you to put together a vision of how much it costs you to live, either monthly, but for this exercise annually is probably a little bit easier to do, even though we most often think about our spending in monthly. And I want you to come up with 3 numbers. There's a minimal, anything below this is really going to be dramatically not okay. There's going to be a medium. Yeah, I think that's a middle ground that looks all right. And then potentially surprisingly large, a larger amount of money. And I'll give like a little note here on consumerism. Sometimes you might look at your fun spending and say, no matter how much money I earn, I could conceivably spend more. Sure, that's true. There's an endless opportunity for shopping in capitalism, but I'm going to invite you to think about a range of comfort for you in terms of spending. It could be more or it could be less than you live on today, but what's a range of comfort? So you've got these categories. You're going to think about your ideal spending, and then you're going to say, do any of these numbers make me wonder or surprise me? There could be tons of things that get in the way of you identifying this money need. Again, there's more detail and nuance on this in our workbook, but sometimes people's brains just break around this idea of how much do I need? Remember to estimate. You're thinking about the next few years. You don't have to think about every dollar you're ever going to need for the rest of your life. Just in the next few years, what do I think is reasonable? A few beliefs that I've seen get in people's way of even understanding or relating to how much you need. There's some resistance to consumerism. This is fear. Well, if I have enough money to buy stuff, I'm going to fall down some hole of shopping that is not okay. P.S. You're not going to change if you suddenly have money. I'm just going to let you know that. If you're not super consumerist, you're not suddenly going to become out of control just because you have money. Number 2, fear of scarcity. So just like even getting into thinking about enough money, I know can bring up some pretty big questions for people. Number 3, magical thinking and math avoidance. Sometimes we just like to hand wave numbers as opposed to look at numbers. Number 4, sometimes people will go into like perfectionistic freeze. If I don't know exactly every aspect of the future life, there's no way that I could figure out what the spending is. You can totally estimate. You can guesstimate. You can make a range. You don't have to be perfect on these numbers to come up with a future number. So without having to be precise, basic expenses, semi-annual expenses, surprises, longer term goals, after working years, a little fun, come up with a number for each of those for annual spending. And if you work for yourself, my friends, do remember you might be thinking about your spending, but that's after tax money. So we'll, in a future chapter, talk a little bit more about how you can think about how much to earn if you work for yourself. But if you are thinking about all of this and you're saying, great, this is the money I'm going to spend, that's after tax. Remember, if you're going to get a new salary, if you're going to be thinking about making money in your business, that number is going to need to be bigger before taxes. But come out with your what I need to spend number, knowing that we don't want to forget this other part. So, friends, coming up with your financial criteria. Take your time with this. Be spacious with this as needed. Lean into the workbook if you need a little bit more support, details, ideas. But this is one way to set a number in front of you to say this looks like the goal.
Wow, it is just so awesome to hear how you think about and talk about money. And I think that the way that you talk about it a lot of times is really different from what some of the stereotypes are about what a financial coach, how they would talk about it, or what people usually mean when they're saying, oh, what do you want with money? I know for myself that was totally true. I felt like in my early young adulthood that I was a lot of times inhibited from asking myself, how much money do you need? Because I also would get really hung up on that's fucked up, or that's about being a consumerist. It seemed like it was an evil question to ask. When I had a breakthrough about it, it was because I did an exercise in a workshop where they were like, what's your money dream? And they included that helping people could be part of it. And that was a huge reframe for me. And when I did that, I realized that my dream included that I wanted an extra room so that if somebody needed to, they could come live with me. It was so clarifying for me where I was like, yeah, that is my financial dream. I want to be able to live as someone who can express myself and express the way that I want to be able to help out. It's such a different image than being I want a gold toilet in my car. It's a totally different. And I realized that in my mind, I thought that if you were asking yourself how much money you want, you probably wanted a toilet in your car.
You're it's really about the private jet. Yeah, no, it's really about clarifying your priorities, but also believing that you deserve to cover your bases. Right? And so the exercise, is inviting you to say, what if my bases were covered? What would that look like? What would that require? And friends, you don't have to like that number. It doesn't have to be true today for it to be a useful number for you.
So if you've done all 5 exercises in the last 2 episodes, that means that you're going to have 5 little piles of criteria from those exercises. And the 5 exercises were your anti-ableist self-acceptance wish list, the I don't have a vision board, identifying how much money you need, values mapping, and time accounting. So what you can do next with those is put them all into one place. And you could put them in a big list, or you can write them on sticky notes. Here's an example of what that might sound like. Let's say you do I don't have a vision board, and you got the criteria like living close to friends, lots of free time, working on topics that intellectually challenge you. You did Hadassah's money exercise, and you got the estimate that you ideally need $94,000 to $104,000 a year. This is just an example. We're just making this up. And you did all the values, strengths, talents, and priorities prompts from the Hadassah's other exercise. And when you did the anti-ableist wish list, you noted that you like to get to move your body a lot during the day and alternate between bursts of work and rest. If you put those all together, your list of criteria would sound like this. My list is living close to friends, lots of free time. I work on topics that intellectually challenge me. I make $94,000 to $104,000 a year. I'm matching my values, strengths, talents, and priorities. I move my body a lot during the day. I alternate between big bursts of work and long periods of rest. That's it. That's it. That's your criteria for your guess about your dream life. That is the what. Okay, so if your brain immediately after reading that list is trying to sabotage you by launching into why your what is impossible, yell, hold your horses, brain, hold them. Brain, just give us 5 minutes between you unleash all the sabotage, all right? Just, horses, hold up. Nay, nay, horses. Look, Brain, this is just the what, okay? You don't have to know the how yet. But if you don't know the what, you can't get it for sure. So we are going to have to admit what the what is if we're going to have any shot of figuring this out. So you don't have to get the what all at once. You don't have to just levitate to your dream life. Most people can't do that. What we're going to do next is we're going to start doing a set of steps that's going to try to get us closer to that list. And if you don't know how to get it all at once, that's fine. So we'll see you next time when we start getting into more of the how.
Happy criteria setting, friends. Thank you, Pippi.
Thanks, Hadassah.